welcome to this Radio Richard podcast. And I'm very, very lucky to have Ron Ramin and Portia Kamons, who are the composers and creators of 17, which is a symphonic narrative work in 4 movements, giving voice to the next generation. Well, what that means is it's a really fun piece to listen to. And I'm very happy to have you guys here. I want to hear how the beginnings of this project happened, and most especially my subscribers. They're 3,500 musicians, and they're
Right.
really interested in the side of it, which I would say, how this piece was ever financed, because, to do something like this for most musicians is a big deal. So,
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, how did you two get together to write this thing?
It's an interesting story. I was sitting home. It was 2018, I guess it was, when there was a shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School in Parkland, Florida.
Right.
And there were all kinds of demonstrations going on and marches, and I thought about participating in one of them. And then I thought maybe the better thing to do was to write something about it, because that's what I do. I compose, and I thought that that would be what I wanted to do. I began to write music alone, and I realized that in this instance, it needed words. And it didn't need singing, but it needed text.
Hmm.
And it didn't need to come from me. It needed to come from young people who were affected by the scourge of gun violence.
Hmm.
So I spoke with a friend of mine who is a composer and a professor at Juilliard, and I explained to her what I was trying to do and how I would be looking for someone to collaborate with. And she said, "Well, I've got the person for you." So she put me in touch with Portia, who we exchanged a couple of emails, and I knew right off the bat that this was the person that I needed to work with. I needed somebody that was going to find these people, interview them, had the sensibility, the understanding of what it might be like, because she grew up. I shouldn't be talking about you, Portia, but she grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania,
Hmm.
and kind of understood the whole gun culture and about what it meant.
Right.
And it just seemed to me like we were a good marriage.
Right.
So we began to work together. Composing is kind of a lonely job, and it's always nice when you can collaborate with someone to bounce ideas
Absolutely.
from. It's imperative, frankly.
Tell me, Portia, what was the process of you and Ron working together? How did you do that? Were you in different areas?
Oh, yeah. I live in London and he lives in California. So, in many ways, it could have been doomed from the outset if we hadn't been creative, if we hadn't been able to use the technology that's available to us to do this stuff, which has evolved throughout this process, even as
Yes.
we were doing it. But I just want to say that when the timing was so fantastic when Ron and I first met, because the woman who introduced us actually composed the music to a piece called Bass Track Live that premiered at the Brooklyn Academy of Music in 2014, and it was a verbatim theater piece with a score throughout, a live score played on stage that told the story of a battalion of Marines and the impact of the Gulf War on them and their families and communities when they returned home. And it's funny because I listened to Gary Sinise on his podcast with you, so I know that you've heard some of these stories about what it's like to be up close and next to these incredible narratives. And that
For
was a
sure.
fantastic experience. And my first time really working in depth on something very challenging with verbatim text. And I just thought this is in this time that we're living in now, where truth is so malleable
Yes.
and questionable. There's something about working with verbatim text that gives you freedom
Yes.
to tell a story that is someone's actual truth.
Hmm.
And I thought when Ron said to me, how could we do this? And I said, well, we'll do it verbatim, and that will keep us honest, and that will be our anchor, and that will be a way to build trust with young people. first thing we did was form an advisory council of people who have done this kind of thing before in social impact in the arts
Sure.
or in activism or in music, or our mentors and friends who could help us, and beyond. And after that, I just started following kids on social media and reading about them in the news and getting in touch with them. And sometimes it was kind of weird, like, I know you're only 13. Can I talk to your mom and make sure it's okay if I call you?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
sure.
strange,
Of
you
course.
know? So it took a long time, but it was such a fantastic, for every element of it was such a fantastic experience, because it was a moment in American history when it was an absolute tipping point. And although there has been gun violence and school shootings since the beginning of
Absolutely.
of time in the United States, uh, this was a moment where the young people grabbed the bull by the horns, and
Right,
the first thing they did was connect with each other. So
right,
the
right,
Florida kids who knew the camera was on them recognized that they had to bring that camera with them to the Chicago kids who
right.
have been in this fight already for decades, for their whole lives, and really be impacted by those stories, which are, once you hear them, you just think, oh,
Sure.
people need to understand this.
Right.
So I would collect these stories
Yes.
and send them to during my day, and then I would send them off to California overnight. I'd go to sleep. Ron would read them, during his working day, and we sort of had this elliptical
Yeah.
work routine from there.
And so the decision of taking the verbatim text, and then obviously you picked and chose the the lines that you thought would be the most relevant and effective. So was that something that you decided with Ron together, or did you present him with, okay, I've got these 10 lines, where can we fit this in? Or, I mean, how did it work?
It was collaborative, wouldn't you say, Ron? I mean, there were
I
there were
would.
certain things. Yeah.
It's funny, Richard. I always told Portia, I said, this job is going to be front loaded for you because you have to conduct the interviews.
Right.
You have to put together a story. My background is in TV and film.
Yeah.
So to me, the words, the story always predominates. If you
Yes.
don't do that, if you're in this for the glory of your music, you're in the wrong business.
Yes. Yes.
So I had to wait until Portia came up with a story. Now, what I would do is I would make the choice as to maybe how to break it up, where there would be musical interludes,
Yes.
where perhaps there might not be any music.
Yeah.
Uh, because sometimes the words are powerful enough you don't want to have music in the
Yes.
place,
Yes.
and but it was definitely collaborative, and I have to say that we never had creative differences. I wanted her to come up with the story. I would tinker around the edges, perhaps I might say, really, can we move this a little bit? Can we
Yeah.
move that? And Portia might say, in this particular instance, it's a little kind of funny what he's trying to say, and maybe you can play on that a little bit.
Sure.
And I think,
Sure.
I hadn't thought of that. Good idea. But we
Yeah.
pretty much stayed out of each other's way, and
Yeah.
it worked out, I think, to our advantage.
That is rare and wonderful. As a fellow composer, I can tell you that's rare and wonderful. Um, it seems to me also, in terms of the text and the music, you did a superb job of the dynamics of the music when they're speaking, and you were still able to, in a way, make it, I guess what they called in the old days, program music. You were still able to do that and still uh, express the certain sentiments that were being spoken, but you didn't get in the way of the vocals at all, and that was very, very nicely done. And we composers, we create our own harmonic and rhythmic universe, so and that's a decision. Everything in music is a decision, it's a choice. The way that I would describe the music, Ron, would be, well, a lot of it does sound like film music. A lot of it sounds like 20th century film music. I mean, it doesn't sound a million miles away from Mr. Bernstein or Mr. Copeland. It doesn't sound a million miles away from that at all. What was your compositional choice at the beginning to what kind of, uh, harmonic universe and that you were creating for it?
Well, I think we all have our own heroes in music, and we all have people that have been influences on us. And
Right,
my favorite music has always been Prokofiev, Ravel,
right,
Copeland. I love that music.
right.
And when I moved to Los Angeles to be a film composer, I was very lucky, and then I got to go to a lot of recording sessions of Jerry Goldsmith and John Williams and Leonard
Right.
Rosenman and all these people. They knew what they were doing. Henry Mancini. I mean,
Sure.
these were giants. Dave Grusin.
Yep.
And if you're not influenced by them, you're not listening,
Yeah.
because they're just a remarkable group of people.
Right.
So it used to be that if someone said, well, it sounds like film music, it was kind of a pejorative statement. But I think after a while, people realized those people knew how to connect with their audience. It's not about how it appears on the score page. It's not a cerebral exercise, and especially knowing that this was accompanying young people. I wanted just to reflect their emotion.
You used language that they were used to hearing. I mean, let's face it, young people watch movies. And I saw that one little bit in the sizzle reel where you said, okay, well, maybe we should do this thing where it's like the beginning of a school day and the bell rings.
I'm old enough to be affected by it. So I'm old enough to be involved.
Because no matter what I get, I bring it back to my community.
Maybe the music should start as if it's 8 a.m. and the bell has gone off in school and everybody is rushing around to get to their classroom. And there's an energy, there's a propulsiveness that gets us into it.
Well, I mean, that's exactly what you did. So that, in that sense, the whole thing reflected the sounds that they were already programmed by watching movies and TV to listen to. So it wasn't a million miles away, even though it wasn't, it wasn't hip hop.
Mhm.
It wasn't rock music. It wasn't Taylor Swift. I want to kind of steer you guys back to how you finance this thing, because my audience always wants to know how did they do that? How did they produce that? How did they get somebody to pay for it? How did you do that?
My background is as a producer and a creative partner in lots of different independent film and live theater and live arts, and I mean, it's a constant struggle. It's never easy, and with this, we were extraordinarily fortunate at the beginning. I have a friend who was moved by our desire to do something, to create something that was going to speak to the issue of gun violence in American schools
Sure.
and communities. And she offered to hold a fundraising event for us at the very beginning, because that's my other hat. We spent a couple of months putting that together, and she made it really beautiful and brought the people. And Ron and I came and did a little dog and pony show and explained what we were trying to do. And these people gave us the money to do it. And you need those kinds of people. So you have to build community around your creative ideas. So go out and find people who
Find
want to support.
When you did the first fundraising event, you said you did a little show, but by that you mean you talked to the audience, but did you actually do any music?
Nothing
Yeah.
was written. It
Yeah.
was I know it's popular to say he had a concept,
Yes. Yes.
but I had a concept
Yeah.
at that point. We hadn't written anything. I must say that seed money that we received was very important
Yes, of
for
course.
us. It's not easy getting people to support
No.
uh, e- efforts like this, and we were very fortunate with Eric Jacobson and the Orlando Philharmonic
Right. Right.
who commissioned it, because you need somebody who believes in what you were doing.
Sure. Sure.
And Eric was the perfect person. He said, I get it. I can see how this is not just a piece of music, but this is an event. And
Right. Of
I
course.
and what Orlando said, they said, we want you to, not only we're going to fly you down for the casting for this, because there are 6 on-stage narrators,
Yes.
but when you come down, we're going to want you to go into the high schools, and we're going to want you to talk with the kids about art and activism and encourage them to come to the concert,
Right.
which they did.
Yes.
I don't think young audiences have anything against violins and oboes, that they have to have anything more contemporary. I mean, they'll go to fill up a concert hall for video game music that's
Right.
all orchestral.
Right. Right.
Or they'll go see Home Alone with
Yes.
John Williams' very orchestral score.
Yes.
It's what are you presenting that speaks to us?
Right.
And Orlando sensed that there was this opportunity to connect with young people. And even though this was not written for young people, it's about young people.
Did Orlando make the connection to all the high schools that you went to?
Orlando did that. Yeah, the education, shout out to the Orlando Education and Community Outreach. I asked them how many kids are going to be there. They said 20, 30, something like that, maybe, but there were hundreds of kids. We also brought 7 of the kids who were in the interview cohort with us to Orlando. We raised the money to
Right.
bring them down because, first of all, we wanted desperately for them to be there to hear the piece, which was its
Yeah.
own incredibly special
Sure.
thing. But they also came with us to the schools, and the great exchanges that happened between young kids, 14, 15, 16 years old, and
Yeah.
these young activists who have only become activists because they were exposed in some way to gun violence. If you want to know about what we've experienced, come and hear this piece. And they did.
Right.
It was amazing.
And I'm sure that the orchestras that you're approaching to do it again will be absolutely jazzed, if I may say, with the fact that you filled up a concert hall with teenagers and think, wow, we could do that too. Let's come do it at our place. I'm now going to sort of be a devil's advocate here because obviously this whole subject is something that's, well, it's dear to the hearts of anybody who has any humanity in America. So, I'm with you all the way on it. But right now, Portia, we are living in a world where the quality of mercy is definitely strained. I mean,
I'm well aware.
so we're in a terrible time that you talk about, and not only gun violence, which is horrific on its own, but everything else that people are having to face, especially young people. I could list them all, but I don't really have to. But my question to you is this: from the time that you began to write this thing, and over the last, say, 10 years or so, sadly, things have gotten worse. So, that as much as this piece is full of hope and positivism, do you see evidence that hope, well, actually, that there is any hope at this point? I mean, because things are really, really so
Yes,
bad that they can't, even calling them bad is too light. So, what do you feel is the real way that any positive creation, such as you've done, can actually help matters?
I think things change one person at a time at this stage in a non-election year when we're all sort of seeing the big picture writ large, and it's a little bit terrifying. But these kids, the kids who are in the interview cohort, the young people I met who are from every region of the United States, they're all Gen Z, but they're a broad range of experiences, of cultures, they're really representative of Gen Z in their own way. And their lives are not easy. And they are not, lazy kids who are on their phone all day. These kids have been active all their lives. Many of them really, there is a line in the libretto, I was born in the movement. There's some of these
Right.
kids have really been in it all their from the very beginning. And there's another line in the libretto that says everyone in Gen Z has a little activist in them. And I think that's also true, that as they come into their power, they're going to be making demands that have been very different from the demands that we made, which was basic, our boomer demands were we just want peace, we want, and let us all just survive, in peace. And I think they're going to, after this, and this too shall pass, I think they're going to want to build a different world that asks for a bit more than just peace.
I
To
hope
make America live up to its promise. Basically, that's what they
hope so.
want, and I sure hope they get it. The power of the concert hall or the theater or the cultural organization in any American city or town is that you can bring all kinds of people together to see something, something wonderful, hopefully, and allow them in a facilitated environment where everyone is safe to talk about it. And that was the great joy of doing 17 in Florida, where we had the piece and we didn't know how people were going to respond afterwards. We have no idea if people will love it or hate it, or the questions that the audience wanted to ask of the activists who were there on stage during the Q&A were respectful and celebratory and kind and interesting. And maybe they went home with a kernel of something.
That audience, our country is really split. You've got 50% of the country thinking as you do, and then you've got 50% of the country who are certainly not. And I mean, even in Florida, Florida is not exactly what I call, a left-wing stronghold. So, I mean, I'm wondering how many people in the concert hall that you saw were, firm supporters of what's happening in America right now.
I'm sure there were people there who, let's say, came from both sides of the aisle, let's just say.
Okay.
I'm sure that there were. First of all, the music is beautiful, so you can't complain about that.
Sure. Yes.
And second of all, what you're hearing is the true verbatim experiences of a bunch of American kids.
Yes.
We tried very hard not to make this a political statement.
Sure.
It's an observation. The reason why we wanted to use verbatim text is because this isn't Ron Ramin or Portia Kamons venting in any way. It's an observation. What began as a piece about the effects of gun violence on young people became something much bigger. It became basically the story of how young people see the world and how they will face it as young citizens of this country. Whatever your political persuasion, when you hear what they have to say, you'll say, I like these kids.
Yeah.
I feel for these kids. I root for these kids. But it is about how young people are going to try to make changes to make this world a better place. I think it gives us a fighting chance of fighting through the noise, getting through, and having people listen to this as a statement of hope. That is what is needed right now, is for us to find ways to bring people together.
I really hope so. And meanwhile, we can just think to ourselves, well, it worked for Bob Dylan, so maybe it'll work for you. I'm sure that a lot of my listeners will want to ask you more questions about this stuff, and I'll put a link so that they can contact you. Well, Ron, thank you so much, and Portia,
Pleasure.
I'm really happy that you could both be here today, and hope to talk to you again about your next piece.
Radio.